Is the tomato cage the biggest gardening scam, or is it a tool that people commonly misuse? Alright guys, welcome back to the Citystead. I am Josh, and today we are going to talk about tomato cages. So I've been out here planting all of my tomatoes. Got a bunch of pineapple tomatoes in here. You guys know how much I love pineapple tomatoes. If you're not growing pineapple tomatoes, are you even growing tomatoes? I've also been adding some to all my little beds. Like this one here, it's got a couple Cherokee purple and some more pineapple right there. Basically I'm planting a lot of pineapple tomatoes this year. I got a couple over here, Cherokee purple and a grape tomato, a little bit different there, and I got a few more that are going to be going in. But while I was out here planting all these out, it's been a couple days now. You see right here we got a whole bunch in our hugelkultur bed, and I am going to put cages on them. And I know cages have a lot of controversy behind them. Now, while I will agree with everyone that tomato cages are probably not the best, I just don't agree with the fact that they're a scam and they're completely useless. Now, as you can see here, we got one of these nice little small 12-inch tomato cages. And yeah, I will admit that this thing, pretty much junk. What do we got here? Oh, we got a nice 14-inch one. A little bit better, a little more distance on it, but also kind of junk. What you want right here is the big daddy of them all, the 16-inch tomato cage. This is the cage for you. So I got Batman out here helping me. Are you Batman? Batman. So I think first of all, we need to look at the tomato cage and think, what is its purpose? It's supposed to cage the tomato and help it grow upward and not completely tip over one side or the other. And I think for the most part, it definitely does that. So the first thing we need to know is that there's actually two kind of main tomatoes. One is a determinate, which means it'll only grow a certain distance. So you're talking about 3, 4, possibly 5 feet. It's kind of the range right there. That's as big as it's going to get, no matter what. And then you have indeterminate tomatoes. Now they will grow upwards of 10 feet. It'll be like a giant vine. It'll just keep going and going. And some of that's going to depend on where you're at. Obviously here in our area, zone 5B, 6A type of zone, our indeterminate tomatoes are still only going to get about 4 or 5 feet tall. They're not going to grow to a massive 10-foot length. So when we're looking at tomato cages for a indeterminate tomato, something like this actually works in our zone. It's tall enough to withstand the entire growth of that tomato for our season. So if you're somebody who lives in a warm climate and you grow indeterminate tomatoes, you're going to want a much different trellis system than what we necessarily need here. I can use a cattle panel and I can grow all my tomatoes on it, and they barely pass the top of this, even if they're indeterminate. Just because of our climate, we don't have that hot of weather and we don't have that long of a growing season. If you are further down south, then you would want to raise these up a little bit to give your plant a bit of space between the bottom of this and a little more height toward the top of it to kind of support that, because you will possibly be able to grow a much taller indeterminate tomato. In fact, we actually use some of the string method where you tie it to the top of something and you go down and tie it around the base of the tomato, and you can wrap the tomato around it to grow it, and that works really well also for indeterminate tomatoes. So your climate is definitely going to make a big difference in how well a tomato cage will work for you. Like I said, you're in a super warm climate, this might be not the right tool for you. But here in the northern climate that we are, these are actually super useful, and I use them. I've been using them for years, and I've never really had any complaints. Not as much as I always hear people talk about. Another thing you always hear people complain about is that a tomato cage just can't hold the weight of a tomato plant. And I think that comes with the fact that people will take this and put it about 2 or 3 inches in the ground. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm guessing they didn't make this thing about 3.5 feet long so that you could just stick a tiny tip of it into the ground and hope it would hold something up. This is one of the most common things I see, is people just stick it in just that little tiny bit, and they think that this is somehow going to hold a huge loaded up tomato plant sometime in the future. Really, what you want to do is take this, you want to push it down as far as you can. We will really want to get it deep into that ground so that there's a lot of leg in there holding this and giving it a lot of sturdiness. Push it down. Just because these 14 and 12-inch ones don't hold up to the nice 16-inch massive, really strong tomato cages, doesn't necessarily mean these are useless either. These little tomato cages will actually work really nice as pepper cages. And you might say, do I really need a cage around my pepper? And the answer is usually yes. It'll just help you kind of guide that plant upward and be able to get to the harvest a little bit easier when you actually have it kind of trellised, almost sort of like, but just kind of caged in a way. And again, same with the tomatoes. If you're going to put it in, stick it down in the ground. You almost want that bottom ring to be just a few inches off the bottom of the ground. You don't want it to just stick a couple inches of the tip of the cage in. That'll obviously not really hold very well, and that is why I think these things get such a bad reputation, because people will stick them in there and then they see them fall over and fall out, and they don't realize that it's because they didn't actually use all of the time to stick it down in the ground. So another reason I keep using these tomato cages is also because I put the investment in to get them up front. And when I first started, I did buy those little rinky-dink ones, and I found out how ridiculously no good they were. But I did invest in these much bigger, larger, stronger cages, and they work just fine for our area at least. Like I said, obviously if you're growing indeterminate tomatoes and you're in a hot weather climate, your tomatoes are going to grow a lot bigger, a lot faster than ours. And this cage probably won't do you a ton of good. It will, however, buy you a lot of time, so you don't necessarily have to put your trellis up as early. You can kind of do a little workaround later and get to it when you actually have time, because sometimes, as we all know, projects just don't happen the second you want them to, but things do need to get into the ground or they will not grow. So usually things go in the ground, and then we kind of work on projects as we have time allotted. Super happy to start seeing this garden really coming together. We're getting all the beds planted out. Super excited about this season. So remember guys, just because everybody else hates tomato cages doesn't necessarily mean that you have to. You just have to use it the right way. It's like a tool. It's kind of like a flathead screwdriver will work in a Phillips head screw, but it's not necessarily the correct tool for that job. So you just got to find out the right job for this tool, and then tomato cages will actually be a very good thing to have. All right, well that's it. We're gonna get out of here. Me and little Oz, backup camera guy. Remember guys, be bold and grow bold, and as always, we'll see you in that very next video.